child, the wife takes the child. Hi-ho, the dairy-o, the wife takes the child takes the nurse, the child takes the nurse. Hi-ho, the dairy-o, the child takes the nurse. The nurse takes the cow, the nurse takes the cow. Hi-ho, the dairy-o, the nurse takes the cow. The cow takes the dog, the
Enemy ship
the
destroyed.
dog. Hi-ho, the dairy-o.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry, where today we are looking at the second supership in the game, given that the event is still ongoing, and that is the USS Annapolis. The Annapolis didn't exist. The Des Moines, in fact, did, and this was the last set of large cruisers that the Americans were building. But in the run-up to the Des Moines, they were having a design from the Baltimores that was sort of a super Baltimore with an additional turret in the rear, because they were not quite contented with the performance of the Baltimore's Mark 15 turrets, considering the firing rate just to being too slow, and as such had a proposal, I think it was the CA-C proposal, to stick an additional turret onto the ship. That never happened because the Des Moines got built with the Mark 16 turrets, which were semi-autoloaders and were significantly better performing than what was on the Baltimore, leading to not having an additional turret and basically building an Alaska with 8-inch guns. So that never happened. We do actually have that design of the Super Baltimore in the game. It's the USS Buffalo. But the Annapolis apparently is sort of a mixture where they said, what if the Americans took the Des Moines and with her turrets and still considered building a larger one? In fact, they only built 3 of the Des Moines anyway, because, by the time they were finished, the war was pretty much done. And missiles were becoming a thing, and then the gun cruisers were no longer really that great. But yeah, that's sort of the backstory of the Annapolis. It's the what-if variant. So we can have a look at that very quickly. So if we check the Buffalo, you see that the Buffalo has the sort of lowered aft deck, and still has the scout plane launchers, catapults in the center. It's effectively a Baltimore with an extra turret, whereas the Des Moines has none of that and has a much straighter deck design, but does not have the super firing turret in the rear, whereas the Annapolis is effectively a outstretched Des Moines with an additional barbette and a super firing turret in the rear. So how do they stack up against each other then, given that this is, for all intents and purposes, a tier 11 ship? Now let's begin with the Annapolis and the Des Moines being the tech tree one. The first thing we notice is that the Annapolis gets a very, very, very good radar, and not just 1 but 3 charges of radar 3. She does get a sonar, making her effectively, well, comparable somewhat to the USS Worcester, honestly, and getting a defensive AA2, just the same as we get on the Des Moines. The Des Moines has the rapid reload, which the Annapolis doesn't get, but the Annapolis gets the Spanish cruiser specialty, the burst fire. So effectively you get 3 salvos, but then you have a 26-second reload after that. The same principle as on the Spanish cruisers applies, that you basically don't want to use that if you're looking for DPS, because it is actually a lower for DPM, if it's a lower DPM value than if you fire the salvos individually. But it is quite useful if you are in specific situations, like you're about to go behind an island and you're going to have to go through the reload anyway. Then you can send a frightening amount of shells downrange. Talking about shells, let's have a look at the difference in hulls between the two. The Annapolis is a little bit better armored, but that doesn't really help her much when it comes to battleship calibers in tier 10, because this is a tier 11 ship. She does get a bit more hit points, and the maneuverability is pretty much the same as we find on the Des Moines. It's just the extra turret. She does lose a second base reload against Des Moines, and obviously does not get the rapid reload ship skill. But the range is a bit better, and the damage is a little bit higher on the shells. In line with what we've seen so far with the superships, the fire chance is not quite as high. So we only have a 6% fire chance compared to the 8% that we enjoy on the Des Moines. The secondaries also, despite the fact that they are technically, well, they're mostly the same. They're a mythological Mark 42 127mm secondaries with a significantly longer barrel, have a longer range and do a bit more damage. But usually this is tier 10, and mostly what you'll be doing is you'll be farming damage at mid to longer ranges using the Des Moines guns. The AA is weirdly weaker than what we find on the Des Moines, especially with the small caliber AA losing 100 base points. And given that the small caliber AA is what gets buffed more and actually has a 3 kilometer range on these ships, that is a noticeable difference. The surface detection is also actually worse, which makes sense given the ship is larger. So how does she stack up against the tier 10 Buffalo, the premium version of the Super Baltimore? Well, she does get the same def AA. Obviously, she does not get the rapid reload. And we're having a similar situation like we have on the Des Moines with more hit points. The Buffalo has not been particularly maneuverable because it's a very large ship. So the Annapolis inherits the Des Moines characteristic in that regard. She does get a faster base reload than the Buffalo, who has to contend with an 8-second base reload on the guns, but obviously with the extra turret. And the Annapolis does significantly more damage with the shells, but has a lower fire chance, as we've just seen. And the same story applies on the secondaries. The Buffalo does not get the Des Moines long-range small caliber anti-aircraft guns. So with the only 1.8 kilometer range, it's not quite the same story as you have on the Des Moines. The Annapolis is ahead here. And in terms of surface detection, still, even though the Buffalo is a stretched ship, the Annapolis still has a worse surface detection. So all in all, it is pretty much what you could call a linear progression from the Des Moines into tier 11 with an additional turret. It's a super Des Moines with an additional turret. That's really what we're looking at here. And with a Spanish burst fire. You do get the chance between you could do the choice between torpedo damage reduction, fire flooding resistance, or more fire flooding resistance. None of them is hugely impactful. I generally go for the bulkhead upgrade just to get the additional hit points. Having main battery range would have been grand, but this is something that we can actually fish out of the historical camouflage. I have no idea what happens to the historical camos if they are, once the event ends, if you get to keep them or not. I would assume that you keep them because they're generally separate items from the ships. I have scenarios where I have historical camos that I can't use because I don't actually have the ship in question. I think I have an incomparable historical camo somewhere. But it does give the much needed firing range, AA range, which is great, and traverse speed, which is also not bad. So that's generally what you can use. Commander-wise, you obviously don't have to spend the 5th slot on an extra rapid reload and the slot at 10 for the master reloader, because none of these affects the burst fire mode. That's the Spanish set. So instead, you can completely build the ship towards a survivalist, which is not bad, given that it is a relatively large ship and really does not react very well to being shot at, as is general for cruisers in tier 10, because the caliber of battleships that are firing at you is not very fun. So no big surprise here. I have used Jesse Oldendorf because he's the only commander in the only non-standard commander in the American line who has the APCS Plus skill, and he also gets the Crossing the T skill, which further reduces the dispersion and increases the citadel damage of the main guns. All very much appreciated. In terms of captain talents, it's a bit of a coin toss again, which direction you want to go. The 35 main battery hits for an extra 4% traverse speed is not a bad choice here. Alternatively, you could go with 3 spots, but it's quite unusual that you'll be taking point in these ships. So that first slot in the red tree would pretty much be wasted, but you would have potential opportunities to reduce your surface detection, things like that, or to if you were going down the fire route, which isn't particularly great on the Annapolis, you could get the main battery shell velocity down, which would also be quite nice. But I think personally for me, the second tree is the better choice here because you get the main battery traverse speed. You then in 14 have the choice of trying to grab the specialist skill, which would give you one up on every skill. That depends on the first strike, which is kind of possible in the Annapolis if you spot something early that, or if you because of the burst fire mode, you spot something that is on relatively low health. You can you can send a strike package of quite some proportion to actually finish off an enemy ship, and that would be an opportunity to give that. Alternatively, and not much worse, you could just take the armor piercer for extra citadel damage. It's not going to make a huge impact. And again, fire flooding is not your specialty in these ships. So that's probably not the greatest choice here either. In 15, you could go for 5 citadels, and that is very much achievable. So if you get enemy cruisers to shoot at, with the sheer amount of armor-piercing shells that you can spit out, that is entirely possible, which would give you 12% shell velocity and 6% surface detection. Alternatively, and maybe more commonly achievable, once you get 30% damage of all enemy ships, you get the reload down by 4%, which is also not a bad one. So, as usual, I have two rounds, one with premium consumables and Oldendorf, and one with a regular tier level 11 commander. So, in both cases, we'll be playing with the APCS skill. And yeah, let's go and have a look at how the Super Des Moines handles in battle. The first round is, as you might notice, full of bots. And this is a very, very common theme. First of all, it's been extremely quiet on the Asian server, where my press account lives. But I've noticed also that with superships, I tend to end up in bot games more often than not. And technically, this should have been a 1v1, so that's what we're going to be treating it. Because, and this is why it's interesting, because I will be fighting the enemy Satsuma, and that gives us a good indication of which one of these in a theoretical 1v1 scenario is going to be more powerful. Because if Wargaming eventually goes and follows up with what they said was going to happen in the patch notes, then there shouldn't be any bots, and this should literally have been a 1 versus 1. So we will be fighting the enemy Satsuma and a bunch of other stuff. Just like with Des Moines, just like with the Buffalo, you play a little different than from a Des Moines. A Des Moines is an island hugger because you can, you have most of your firepower forward, and you can compensate for being a cruiser with relatively short range by sitting next to an island in a relatively aggressive position. In the Buffalo, you can't really do that. You play these things actually more like the American light cruisers, in that you have to abuse island cover and sitting behind islands and shooting over them, rather than being out in the open next to them. So just to get all of your guns on target. She is reasonably maneuverable, unlike the Buffalo, which kind of makes it possible to dodge incoming fire. But you do have to be very, very careful if you're playing the ship out in the open, that you are not running into situations where you get into a crossfire, because a well-placed salvo from a Christopher Colombo or a Vermont or anything like that, or a Yamato, is going to make extremely short work of you. So you can lose more than half your hit points in one salvo very, very easily. And we're not even talking about things like the Satsuma yet, but we'll get to that. First of all, it's a bot game, so we'll be hunting some bots. Obviously, we do not want to rush all the way ahead, because let the other bots do that, because bots proximity target. There's an enemy Venezia, and there's the Harugumo. So in normal scenarios, you're just gonna be firing the guns as is. One thing I noticed about these guns is that they behave really, really weirdly if you're locked on target. They tend to, in my experience, they tend to shoot either too high or too low. But once you get them on target, that sort of thing happens. And definitely do not use do not use the burst fire unless you are in a scenario that you either need to finish off a ship, or that you need that you're running like behind an island or something, and you're not gonna be able to shoot at things anyway for a while. So yeah, the lock-on behaves a little bit weirdly. So if you see me not actually using the lock-on, that's often just because I'm trying to avoid the weird auto-lock targeting that seems to be happening with this ship. So there, for now, we have spotted the enemy Satsuma. He's at the end of the map. So obviously I want to be bow in towards the Satsuma, not giving him broadside. And just eliminating the bots here as they go. So there goes the Henri. And yeah, let's not talk about the name of that bot. That just finished him off. It's some localization issue. What else is new? We've got a Yamato to shoot at, and with a Yamato you do want to target the smokestack such that your shells are landing at the rear end, where you have a lot of ship to hit. So she's relatively broad on the rear, and you do get reliable full penetrations. But again, the shells can behave really weirdly if you're using the auto lock on. I'm going to try and see if I can get some fire set, because this is after all a bot, and it is only a 6% fire chance. But the Yamato is about to go behind the island there, so there's one fire. I'm going to use the burst fire mode now. So that's 3 salvos out. So let's see if we can set another fire, and the answer is no, we cannot. So that was a bit of a waste. But now I'm sitting on a relatively long reload. However, I do need to watch out with the enemy Satsuma over there, who so far seems to be otherwise occupied. Now that the bot Yamato is behind the island, I am going to start unloading at the Satsuma once my guns are reloaded. And I'm already positioning myself behind this island here in order to stay undetected. Now I'm going to slow down, and I'm going to abuse the ledge and just hit the rear of the enemy Satsuma. Unfortunately, the Kremlin over there is within my range, so it keeps me spotted. But look at the amount of damage that you can very rapidly do against battleships with these guns if you are targeting the weak spots. I'm going to shoot at the bow. I could be shooting at the deck, but yeah, ow, I just got hit by the Yamato. So I'm going to use the burst fire and try and finish off the Yamato. So that's 1, 2, 3, and the Yamato is dead. Now I'm going to Damacon. I'm going to go behind the island, and I'm going to wait for my guns to reload. Satsuma is down to half health. We're 3 on 3, and we have a slight lead in points, but it's still anybody's game. So I definitely have to be very careful here now. Satsuma is steaming ahead, so I am going to again target the center of the ship. I'm going to go bow in while trying to scoot behind the island, but I now have to time his salvo. I definitely do not want to give a broadside if he potentially has the guns ready and pointed at me. So I am just doing a lot of damage. Shot off his rudder. There comes one salvo from the massive guns on that ship, but that wasn't everything just yet. So not entirely certain where the rest of it is. But we'll keep. Maybe he still has to turn the guns around. But we'll keep more or less bow in, wiggle the ship. She has Des Moines mobility, so you can do this out in the open. Now we're going to accelerate. There come the forward turrets. I'm going to try and turn in and dodge below them. Hasn't quite worked, but I've taken it on the belt. There comes one of the. I think that was one of the rear turrets, or that's where the rear turrets. So now the turrets are empty, and now I'm activating the burst fire to finish off the Satsuma with maximum DPS before he can reload, and that is the end of the game. If you are in a 1 versus 1 scenario, and this is sort of what I've been predicting. When I've read the patch notes for the superships. If you are in a 1v1 scenario with an Annapolis against the Satsuma is toast. If you're not sitting there broadside, there's absolutely nothing you can do against a Des Moines mobility cruiser with that amount of firepower. It can outspot you, and it'll just simply outplay you. So I'm not sure how this is going to work out once they decide that bots are no longer going to be in there. But let's see a second round. And we end up in a 3 versus 3 scenario. Again, it's a Satsuma on the enemy team, together with a Yamato and a Worcester. And we are playing domination on haunted seas. Still plenty of bots here, so we do have to be a little bit mindful of how things are going to work. But in technically, this should have been a 3 versus 3, which is a much more interesting scenario than a 1v1 with superships, because their ship class really just matters. But just one destroyer and it's a bot, so we don't have to worry about it too much. We do have the radar sonar combo. I haven't yet managed to actually get into a carrier game with the superships, so far no chance of actually testing the AA. But yeah, if there were any destroyers, just be aware that this thing is basically a Worcester with 8-inch guns and Spanish burst fire. So she can one-shot a destroyer at close range, a full health destroyer with a burst fire relatively easily. So you do have to be very, very careful with these things. Anyway, we're going to get our position inside A cup. There is the Worcester. So because Worcester is going to go out of range relatively quickly, I'm sending the burst fire over. Unfortunately, the island hitbox is not playing ball, and half of my shells, which should have gone through, actually hit the invisible hitbox, and now I'm on the long reload. But it looks like most of the enemy team is going north, except probably that St. Vincent over there. So for now, we'll wait for the guns to come off cooldown, and then we'll farm the bot while letting the friendly bots take the heat. The Worcester is over there, which means the Satsuma and the Yamato are somewhere over there as well. And yeah, we'll just keep doing damage against the St. Vincent. St. Vincent should be shooting at the bot. Unfortunately, St. Vincent decided that despite the fact that there are many more ships to shoot at, he wanted to shoot at me, which isn't what usually bots do. But oh well, here we go. First heal, and that's where the HP tank build comes in with the captain. Of course, the Harugumo bot just dances below your salvo. This is also why you should not use your burst fire on bots, because they do that, and then you've got 3 salvos basically missing, because the ship just does the shake and goes somewhere else. But look at the friendly bot. Look at the Goliath torpedoing a Harugumo. Well done. There's another St. Vincent bot over there. So we're weeding out the bots for now, just to get ready for the actual game. There is Worcester. And Worcester is fully broadsiding and is within range, but I do have to be careful with the bigger guns. We have a friendly Yamato here who is in a ranged duel with the enemy Yamato. Worcester is behind the island, so not much I can do, but I can give Yamato a bit of fire support. Oh no, actually Worcester decides he wants to come out of the island. That is appreciated. Fully broadsiding Worcester. And again, the lock-on gets really weird sometimes, where in deciding where your shells land. So if you're firing at relatively maneuverable targets at 10 kilometers, you oftentimes have really, really wonky results. Okay, Worcester is otherwise occupied. There's the Satsuma. So I've got Yamato on my left, Satsuma in front of me, Worcester on my right. So while the Worcester is otherwise busy, we'll concentrate fire on the Worcester. And we'll try to get that thing sunk before the enemy heavy hitters have something better to do. Now the Großer bot has been sunk, and that means there's Shima still, but Worcester is the biggest threat for my Shima, so I'm definitely going to try and get that thing killed. There he goes. Before Shima comes around the corner, and that means Shima is safe. So even if I go down, Shima can help himself to the big ones. Now we've got a Satsuma to shoot at, and you've seen already in the last video how a 1 versus 1 between Annapolis and Satsuma generally ends up, especially now that I have a Shimakaze here. The friendly Yamato has gone down, but it's just the 2 players left on the enemy team, and I don't think the Satsuma has angles at me from there. So given that the Yamato isn't there, he's somewhere over there. He's behind the other island, and Shimakaze has gotten himself spotted. I don't know. Oh, because he's close to Satsuma, that's why. So Shimakaze is going for the Satsuma here with a relatively aggressive run, and I'm definitely going to keep the island between myself and Yamato over there. So I'll leave the Satsuma to the Shima. Shima smokes up, and that should be the end of the Supership over there, because without his Worcester, to rescue him. He has absolutely no counterplay. Yamato is shooting at me, so we're already turning in. That is the Des Moines maneuverability at play here, where you can actually dodge under incoming fire. What are you doing there? How did that Satsuma survive? I'm not entirely certain what Shimakaze was doing here, but I'm behind the island, so let's finish off the Satsuma by using the burst fire, and then we're going the other way around, and we'll take care of the Yamato. See, this is what the burst fire mode is best suited at, finishing off low health enemy ships. Let's use the radar to ensure that we know where exactly Yama is. He is at the edge of the capture circle there, and I'm just going to wait out my turret rotation. I'm going to wait out my reload, and then we'll go in. Now the Yamato should know that I'm here somewhere, but I'm obviously not spotted. So we'll go into a close range engagement with the Yamato, and we'll just have some fun because we've obviously won this game. There's absolutely nothing the Yamato can do at this point. Just using the sonar again to see if I can acquire him before I get spotted myself. He should be somewhere there at the edge of the... Yep, there he is. Hello, Mr. Yamato. So that is a little bit too far forward. He is very slow. Let's get burst fire mode out. Give him a fighting chance. Fully broadside. Yep. Okay, that was your shot. Now burst into the stern section, and I think we have shot off his engine or his rudder. Now we heal up, go bow in to deflect the next salvo from the Yamato, and then we'll give him a fighting chance once my guns are reloaded. So we'll outplay the next main gun salvo at this range. Yep, that worked. Has shot off one of my guns, but you are now out, and unfortunately that means my one turret that has been repaired has to go through the burst fire penalty, which means I did not have enough firepower to finish off the Yamato here, but it's fine. He is dead. Shimakaze has taken him out, and that is the end of the battle. Annapolis, compared to Satsuma, is a very, very different ship. Basically plays like a crossbreed between a Buffalo and a Des Moines. Is an extremely dangerous boat, but the obvious downside is that it's a very large cruiser, and it's relatively easy for battleships to blow out of the water. So positioning is key. But if you know how to play heavy cruisers in high tiers, then if you're happy to play something like a Hindenburg, or you're happy to play something like a Worcester, or something like a Des Moines, then the Annapolis is going to be right up your alley. So play it more like a light cruiser almost, but you can obviously do the burst fire, insane amount of damage output thing if you need to. It's a very powerful ship, and definitely belongs into tier 11 for all intents and purposes. The Buffalo is bad enough as it is at tier 10, but this thing is an absolute menace. So be aware and be very careful. Obviously, you can counter the ship. She does have good AA. Haven't been able to play against carriers yet. You can counter the ship. It is a large target. Battleships can and will have a field day if they catch you unawares. Something like a St. Vincent, Colombo, Vermont, any of the big guns can, if you're not careful, end you very quickly. But that is true for most top tier cruisers. So if you're familiar with cruisers, you're going to have a blast in the Annapolis. My biggest complaint probably is that mostly you'll just be spending your money to play against bots, which is kind of not as rewarding. But if you're up against an enemy Satsuma and you know what you're doing, the Satsuma doesn't stand a chance. So there's that. And that's it for me today. Thanks everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.